Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. A lot of you guys have recently asked me which rogue spec am I going to be maining for the rest of Season 3, and it looks like Outlaw rogue is in a viable position. The spec itself is actually not doing that bad in raid content, keeping up with subtlety and assassination fairly closely, and even ahead of them in certain encounters like Soul Hunters for instance, but also it's actually pretty good for Mythic Plus, able to push some of the highest content out there. So the spec is definitely viable, but for many players first checking out Outlaw rogue for the very first time, a lot of them find it very hard to play. Previously we had two builds of Outlaw rogue, the keep it rolling version and the ambush version. The ambush being the easy play is what a lot of players gravitated to, but right now, while it is easy, it is just not as strong as keep it rolling. And keep it rolling is very tough because it plays around the randomness of roll the bones, which is a very hard mechanic for players to pick up, especially if you're someone who is new to the spec in particular, and it just makes it super not new player friendly. However, a brand new build has come up using the talent of Sleight of Hand, which improves the randomness of RNG of this spec, giving you more chances for the godly 5 buff combo, removing a lot of the RNG, fixing a lot of the gameplay, simplifying the rotation, and making the spec so much more approachable for new players than ever before, with just a handful of WeakAuras in order to help modify your gameplay. So for today's video, I actually want to go over exactly what are some of the new builds for Outlaw rogue that you need to pick up as soon as possible if you want to give this spec a go, as well as how to set up your WeakAuras correctly in order to be able to capture the full value of this brand new Sleight of Hand build. As always, if you guys want to see more rogue builds in the future and more guide builds in the future, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So if you keep up a close trend with Outlaw rogues, you'll notice a switch as more rogues are picking up a talent of Sleight of Hand, a talent that became a lot more popular in the patch 11.1 The Undermine raid because it synergized incredibly well with their tier set at the time. The talent itself by itself is actually good and it keeps some of those buffs. Even though we no longer have the Undermine tier set, it has actually crept up back into the meta, especially for somebody who hates the RNG of Roll the Bones. And the best part is, the talent directly improves the randomness of you being able to get more buffs every time you press Roll the Bones, resulting in more uptime on 5 buffs God mode, which is exactly what you're trying to fish for with some of the newer builds that have come out for the spec specifically. Without the talent, your chances of getting buffs within Roll the Bones is very RNG, and not in your favor, as you normally have about a 78% chance to get 1 buff, which is not great, 20% chance to get 2 buffs, and a 2% chance to get a 5 buff. So you're looking at about 22% chance to get a decent set of buffs that you can work with, and the rest is just trash you're going to be rolling out of pretty regularly. However, with the talent, your chances have been improved. Then, with the talent, you will have a 58% chance to get 1 buff, a 35% chance to get 2 buff, and a 7% chance to get a 5 buff, which is massive. Rounded up 7 is pretty close to 10%, so you're looking at about a 1 in 10 chance every time you press the button of just locking in a God roll buff, which is amazing. So with the improved RNG, you now have a very high chance of at least keeping 2 buffs every time you roll the bones, which is massive and allows us to use Adrenaline Rush in a much more aggressive way. We also get to keep the talent, however, of loaded dice. So activating Adrenaline Rush causes your next roll the bones to get at least 2 matches. So when you pop Adrenaline Rush, you get the buff of loaded dice that guarantees at least 2 buffs you're going to be able to get when you press Roll the Bones. So you're basically also eliminating the RNG of getting the bat buff, and in most cases you are looking at chances of you getting 1 buff when you roll as a very low chance in general, just really incredibly low. So for the most part, you're going to be spending most of your time in combat with 2 or more buffs, because there's still also talents such as Count the Odds, which can randomly generate your buffs for 8 seconds when you ambush, sinister strike, or dispatch, which you do a lot as an Outlaw rogue throughout raids and dungeons. So you're most likely going to be sitting on 3 buffs more than anything, which is a huge gain and makes the Outlaw feel fast-paced, feel smoother, feel much better in general. So we have 2 talents that improve the RNG of Roll the Bones. One that completely eliminates the ability for us to get a 1 buff, especially during our Adrenaline Rush window, which is up a lot, so we get in the procs regularly, and Sleight of Hand to further improve your chances of potentially rolling someone really strong and viable as a buff combo, just overall improving the feel and playstyle of the Outlaw rogue. And what's cool about the improved RNG is that it allows us to use Roll the Bones aggressively, not just as a way for us to get more buffs, but also to amplify our damage a lot more. This is because of a talent of Supercharger, which allows us, when we press Roll the Bones, to use our finishers to act as if they consumed additional combo points. We're also running an upgrade talent of Supercharger to add an additional combo point to this synergy. This allows our abilities to act as if they consume additional combo points, so if let's say you use Dispatch at max 7 combo points, it'll act with the Supercharger like it consumed 10, which makes it hit harder. So when you apply it for strong finishers such as Killing Spree, for instance, which is a very hard hitter, then you're seeing where some of that damage can come from. It also helps Outlaw in a massive way because Supercharger not only impacts the damage of these finishers but helps Outlaw rogues with its cooldown reduction mechanic through the talent of Restless Blades. As you spend combo points into finishers, major abilities for us from Killing Spree, Between the Eyes, Adrenaline Rush, Vanish, and even Blade Flurry and even Roll the Bones all have their cooldowns shaved off, as now we get to spend even more combo points into our finishers. So we are either rolling to see if we can get that 5 buff legendary combo, which is exactly what we got here. Improved RNG, 1 in 10, baby. That's all you need. And now I have to keep it rolling. I can just lock it in. There it is. I can just keep these buffs rolling for an eternity. It's so good. It feels so nice. But also, since you are having to aggressively roll, you're going to get a lot of value from Supercharger. What this does is gives you a win-win condition. Either you're rolling and you get the 5 buff combo where you have a ton of combo point generation, a ton of cooldown reduction, lots of crit, lots of damage, lots of energy in some cases, or potentially more procs of Sinister Strike, which gives you more pistol shots with the skull buff. So you basically are in this god mode where you're doing the most amount of damage, or you're getting aggressive usages out of Supercharger, which gives you more damage for finishers but also helps reduce the cooldown of many of your abilities. Reducing cooldown of Adrenaline Rush as well as Vanish, so you can use Vanishes to prolong the uptime of Adrenaline Rush, and this allows you, if let's say you're not great at managing uptime of Adrenaline Rush but keep it rolling, this build makes that effect easier. This build allows you to use Killing Spree, a very hard-hitting ability, a lot more regularly. It also, with the whole cooldown reduction, gives you chances to get Roll the Bones back more often, so it kind of just interacts together super well. Aggressively rolling to get a good buff, you're still rewarded with Supercharger, which will let you roll aggressively, which will let you get Supercharger again. It just plays itself super nicely, and the best part is that actually takes away a lot of mental load from playing Outlaw, resulting in a simplified rotation, which could easily be handled by a WeakAuras, and I'll show you towards the tail end of this video as to how to set it up, because it's really easy to do. I also want to cover the builds and how that changes the 3 known builds for Outlaw Rogue that you should be playing this season. The first one being the raiding build, which is the Fatebound playstyle, which I actually really like, especially with some of the tech that has been found with Vanish and using Fatebound tier set mechanics. But potentially maybe a video for that later down the line if more information is found. We do have that info updated in our Discord written guide, so definitely worth checking that out. But when you're trying to adapt the raiding Outlaw build, you're actually going to be taking a point out of Blinding Powder and out of Heavy Hitter. You would think Heavy Hitter is a really good talent. It isn't. It's kind of okay, but Sinister Strikes and Pistol Shots are only a portion of your damage. Getting better RNG with Roll the Bones actually outweighs it. In Sims, it's not going to really reflect that, but the realistic impact of your going Sleight of Hand over Heavy Hitter is a lot more noticeable. It likely is not going to be updated in SimC for a very long while, but if you look across all Outlaw Rogues, a lot of players are dropping Heavy Hitter for better RNG. And because Blinding Powder doesn't really have much use in raids, most people just pick it up more survivability with combat stamina, and then you pick it up Sleight of Hand, which is improving your RNG of Roll the Bones, allowing you very aggressive uses of Supercharger. And like I said, there's also so many other benefits with it, and that's essentially the only way you're going to be altering this playstyle. Now, if you're playing the raid version of Outlaw Rogue, Cleave build, which is really good for fights such as Soulbinder, Araz, as well as Soul Hunters, even on Mythic, all those fights enjoy Cleave capabilities. So there's a Trickster version for Raid Cleave, which we'll also have updated in the description of this video, with all the builds you can find in the description of this video, but also in our Discord guide as well. All of them have been fully updated for this new set of changes. For the Trickster playstyle, you're also going to be dropping Heavy Hitter, picking up Sleight of Hand. You also are not picking up Swift Slasher, because we just need to combo points for things like Teach of Versatility and Killing Spree, so switching over to Sleight of Hand ends up being the best option, but we'll still be picking up things like Dance of Steel as well as Precise Cuts, because Precise Cuts gain the benefit from extra targets from Dance of Steel, and that ends up being a really good combo even in smaller cleave target fights like Soul Hunters, for instance, where there's only like 2 other targets for you to cleave. Of course, we also have the Mythic Plus build, which is going to be synergized in Outlaw with Trickster. However, to pick up sleight of hand for this build, it is a little bit weird. We want to keep Deft Maneuvers because the common point generation in Mythic Plus is amazing. So the only talent we can really swap out of is Thieves Versatility. 3% versatility from a single talent point is actually a huge stat gain, so we're dropping quite a decent bit of stat for sleight of hand. That being said, it may potentially be kind of like a no difference type of a trade. Your damage may not be impacted too much. However, the feel of, or the quality of life changes of just having better RNG with buffs, but also using Supercharger more aggressively in dungeon content does allow abilities like Blade Flurry, which is now a common point dealer and a hard hitter, and just makes the playstyle play so much smoother. It is a better trade-off in my opinion. It is one of those things that helps Outlaw feel much smoother within Mythic Plus content, especially if you're someone who finds yourself having a very hard time managing the uptime of abilities like Adrenaline Rush. Now, as for the actual gameplay changes of this build, all you have to do is use Roll the Bones whenever you have 1 or 2 buffs, whether you have loaded dice or not. Your chances of rolling a 2 buff is really high, so you basically in most cases are replacing a 2 buff with another 2 buff. The only time you stop rolling is either if you have rolled into a godly 5 buff, which is going to happen a lot more regularly with sleight of hand, just from the statistical RNG, or if let's say you generate additional buffs from Count the Odds, which those count as real buffs. So if you roll, you got a 2 buff, you get random procs of buffs from Count the Odds for like a 3rd buff or a 4th buff. If you have 4, definitely lock it in with a Keep It Rolling, but those count as real buffs. And those are sometimes hard to track, but if you're using the WeakAuras that we'll be using for this playstyle, it also tracks those things pretty easily. It'll just tell you when to roll and when you don't roll. It'll just light up when you need to press the button, otherwise you don't need to mess with it. So it accounts for all of these different rules and conditionals and makes playing the spec much easier. And also remember, once you have 4+ buffs from Keep It Rolling, definitely lock those buffs in. There is some little optimization you could do because Outlaw rogues do like Broadside as a buff. So if you have Broadside up and Keep It Rolling, you could potentially just stop rolling the bones and hopefully fish for a couple of extra buffs from Count the Odds and then lock those in. But that's a little optimization. It's very optional for the most part. Even if you just slam Roll the Bones without any thought process, it'll still do a ton of damage. It'll be overall a gain for the spec in general. And the best part is, if you lock it, or if you set up your WeakAuras correctly, you don't really have to do a lot of thinking. Again, best part about this. So if you have Roll the Bones WeakAuras, which we have a link to it in our Discord channel, if you want to be on the safer side of things, if you want to click it and potentially even duplicate this WeakAuras and maybe separate it from the normal Roll the Bones, we're using, let's say, Sleight of Hand, you can just rename it with Roll the Bones Sleight, possibly turn off the other WeakAuras for the time being. And if you want to add a load conditional for the new one using the Sleight of Hand, you can also have it select a talent and then select the talent of Sleight of Hand here. So now it'll be on whenever Sleight of Hand is used. So if you want to go back to a normal build or an old build, or if you don't like Sleight of Hand, you can just have this WeakAuras completely fall off immediately. But when you do have it talented, it'll be enabled. The only other thing you will need to do is you will actually need to add an extra conditional in the trigger section. Hit expand, and you'll be able to get a huge string which basically goes into the guts of the WeakAuras itself. The only part you really need to do is scroll down a little bit towards the start of rules down here. And this is basically where all the rules are for Roll the Bones regarding what buffs it has and what buffs it doesn't. If total buffs equal to 0, it'll tell you to Roll the Bones. So what you can actually do with this is if you change it to a 3, instead of equals, you could just do a less than sign. If you have less than 3 buffs, the WeakAuras will generally tell you to Roll the Bones. So if you have 2, 1, or 0, then it'll tell you, hey, press the button right now. This changes it, so it now adapts for the rule set that we have with Sleight of Hand, and it basically does majority of the thinking and processing for you. The other one here is the conditional with Loaded Dice. If Loaded Dice is active and certain buffs are up, basically it will tell you to Roll the Bones if it has 2 or less buffs. What you want to do in order to adjust it for Sleight of Hand is we'll actually remove all of these conditionals here with True Bearing, with Broadside and all that. Just remove it completely for the AM part. If total buffs is less than equals to 3, I guess we could do less than 3. And then after adjustment, this is more or less what it should look like. That's all you gotta do. Because from there, it'll essentially just adjust the build and adjust the playstyle, so it'll let you know that Roll the Bones is ready when you have 2, 1, or no buffs at all. So if let's say you were to try to take it out for a spin in a Cleave targets, which by the way, I love how they added some Cleave targets out here in the Millennia Threshold, the room for Mythic Plus dungeons. It is so nice looking. So right now, it actually tells me I will have a bad roll if, let's say, I don't have a lot of buffs available. I'm actually in a situation where I was able to lock in a keep it rolling build, but right now you can see I have 2 buffs, Skull and Crossbones, Buried Treasure. It's telling me to roll because it now has different rule sets available, and even here it says bad roll, I only have 2 buffs. It is telling me you're basically just going to be trying to roll out into a new buff as soon as possible. Right now I have 3, because I got one from Count the Odds. So it's actually don't tell me not to roll, but as soon as it falls off, it'll tell me, hey, roll. This way I'm able to maximize the use of my supercharged talent, so I can get a lot of that cooldown reduction for so many different abilities. Like Adrenaline Rush is now coming back up, so pretty sure 3 minutes did not pass. All I've done is just roll the bones and use my finishers whenever it is active. But that's the benefits of supercharging, though. You are just naturally going to notice that your cooldowns are coming back a lot quicker, because you either lock it in like a 5 buff god mode, where you're just going to naturally get a lot of calm point building and spending, which is going to get you buffs back quicker. Or if you don't have god mode, you're getting a lot more up to one supercharger, which is naturally going to give you cooldowns to come back a lot quicker. It's just, like I said, a win-win situation when playing Outlaw Rogue, where the rest of the time you only have to do is just build calm points, spend them as efficiently as possible, and let the WeakAuras do the rest of the work for you. Now, before we end the little guide update here, I did hear from a lot of you guys saying that you want to play Outlaw Rogue, you want to give Keep It Rolling build a try, but it's so difficult to gear for, because you do need at least like 18 to 20% haste in order to make this build work. And hopefully in the future, Blizzard will end up buffing up ambush builds, which are much easier to gear for, and in some cases much easier to play. But if you're somebody who wants to play Outlaw Rogue, but you're struggling to reach the 18 to 20% haste cap from your gear, something you can actually do from the auction house when it comes to your consumables is actually start running the Tempered Swiftness flasks, which provide you up to pretty much 3,000 points worth of haste, which is a lot of points. So if you're somebody who cannot really, if you want to play Keep It Rolling, but just can't quite meet the haste caps, which are required to make the Keep It Rolling builds work, and they will feel much better once you reach the haste cap. Ideally, at the end of the day, you should be able to get enough haste from gear in order to be able to go with a versatility flask for raw damage, but that haste cap is so crucial that unless you are hitting that cap specifically, between 18 to 20%, no more, no less, it isn't really viable to play. But hopefully that little tip will give more of you an opportunity to experience Outlaw Rogue, because the Spec itself is actually really fun. Like, this might be one of the best tiers since we've ever had. This patch in particular, between Fatebound and Trickster, all of them feel very strong right now, and feels like in some ways they are almost designed for the unique mechanic of the Gambler Outlaw Rogue. The Spec itself feels amazing, especially when it comes to mobility, and defenses are out of this world. It actually feels super fun to play with in the moment. The only part that holds the Spec down for a lot of players out there is the randomness of Roll the Bones, and with a couple of WeakAuras and with this new build, you can essentially bypass any minutia or difficulty or complexity of that whole mechanic in general. But with that, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give the video a like, as I would very much appreciate it. Also, be sure to join our Discord community, especially if you want to get access to the written version of the Outlaw Rogue PvE guide, which will have all of these recent adjustments to the sleight of hand build, which I think is looking like the meta build, the go-to build right now for the Outlaw Rogue for the season. All of those adjustments are there, and even more detailed information and links to all the different WeakAuras you need can be found there as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.